Don't you know it? You click the record button and suddenly all the traffic shows up. We'll give it just a minute here. So hey everyone, my name is Ken McGowan. I am an amateur aspiring writer working on my first novel, and one of the ways that I'm learning, as a lot of writers do, is by reading a lot. Reading well outside what I grew up reading diversely, reading a lot of different styles. And Amazon has been a brilliant help for that. Being able to download Kindle samples and read through the first couple chapters of a book gives you an opportunity to sample lots and lots of different things, all from the comfort of your own home. So today I'm going to be reading a book titled Glaciers. Let me pull up the info here real quick. But anyway, yeah, so I thought if I'm reading all these anyway, why not go ahead and see if I can reach out to some other folks and share some of these with other people, and hopefully you enjoy it, and maybe you'll find the next book that you want to read. So like I said, I'm going to be reading Glaciers by Alexis M. Smith. And you can actually find this sample that I'm going to be reading on Amazon.com yourself by looking at the book and selecting the Kindle version, and then clicking on the download sample link. Now I'll say real quick, I believe this falls well under the within the bounds of fair use in terms of copyright. That said, I don't want to be a jerk about it. If you're the author and you happen to see this and you'd rather I didn't do it, please just let me know, and I'd be happy to take it offline. So let's go ahead and read through, and we'll talk about it a little bit afterwards. Right before I begin, let me give you just a little sample of the description of the book. Glaciers unfolds in... There we go. Glaciers unfolds internally, recalling the work of writers such as, I don't know how to say this name properly, I'm going to say Jean Rhys, maybe, Marguerite Duras, and Virginia Woolf, and portrays how the fleeting moments of one day can reveal an entire life. Let's begin. Oh, I should also say, I'm broadcasting this to several different platforms. This is a little bit of a test today. Because I'm doing that, I can't actually see any feedback. I can't see if anyone's actually watching live. I can't see any comments or other things. So I will be able to see afterwards. But right now it's probably for the best, because I think if I knew anyone was watching me, I'd probably be feeling a lot more nervous. All right, let's begin. Amsterdam. Isabel often thinks of Amsterdam, though she has never been there and probably never will go. As a child in a small town on Cook Inlet in Alaska, she saw volcanoes erupting, icebergs looming at sea before she ever saw a skyscraper or what could properly be called architecture. She was 9 years old, on a trip to her aunt's with her mother and sister the first time she visited a real metropolis, Seattle. She took it all in. The towering buildings and industrial warehouses, the train tracks and bridges, the sidewalk cafes and neighborhood shops, and the skyline along Highway 99, the way the city seemed to rise right up out of Elliott Bay, mirroring the Olympic Mountains across the Sound. The breadth and the details overwhelmed her, but soon she loved the city in the same way she loved the landscape of the north. Old churches were grand and solemn, just like glaciers, and dilapidated houses filled her with the same sense of sadness as a stand of leafless winter trees. She began collecting postcards of other cities: Paris, London, Prague, Budapest, Cairo, Barcelona. She borrowed books from the library and watched old movies just to get a glimpse of these other places. She imagined visiting them, walking in the streets, sleeping in creaky beds in hostels, learning a few words of every language. Isabel finds the postcard of Amsterdam on Thursday evening at her favorite junk store across from the food carts on Hawthorne. It is a photograph of tall houses on a canal, each painted a different color, pressed together and tilted slightly like a line of people, arm in arm, peering tentatively into the water. The picture has a technicolor glow, the colors hovering over the scene rather than inhabiting it. She turns the postcard over, expecting nothing, an antique white space never utilized, like others on the rack, bought decades ago on long-forgotten vacations and never mailed. But Amsterdam had been stamped. Amsterdam had been posted. The postmark is dated 14th of September, 1965, and there is a message carefully inscribed. Dear L, fell asleep in a park, started to rain. Woke up with my hat full of leaves. You are all I see when I open or close a book. Yours, M. Isabel stands before the rotating metal rack for a long time, holding the postcard, rereading the message, imagining the young man, it must have been a young man, whose small, precise handwriting stretches across allotted space perfectly. She imagines the young woman, Miss L. Bertram, 2580 North Ivanhoe Street, Portland, Oregon, who received the postcard, and how much she must have read between those few lines, how much she must have longed for him to say more. Isabel turns back to the image of Amsterdam, wondering if the houses on the canal still stand, or if they have succumbed to time and damp. Amsterdam is one of those low-lying cities, she thinks, remembering a New Yorker article about melting ice caps. She searches the rack for more of Amsterdam and the correspondence between M and L, but finds none. She buys the postcard and leaves with it tucked deep in her coat pocket. Walking home, she thinks Amsterdam must be a lot like Portland, a slick fog of a city. In the winter, drenched in itself. In the spring and summer, leafy, undulating green, humming with bicycles, breeze-borne seeds whirling by like tiny white galaxies. And in the early glorious days of fall, she thinks, looking around her, chill mist in the mornings, bright sunshine, and halos of gold and amber for every tree. Back in her apartment, she pins Amsterdam to the wall above her bed, beneath another old postcard, 4 brightly painted totem poles, and a few muskeg spruce, leaning over a marshy inlet. Glaciers. Isabel's parents returned to Alaska soon after she was born. They had lived in Washington for 4 years, since Isabel's older sister Agnes was born. They lived in a dumpy apartment over a drugstore in Bellingham, then in a cooperative household in Seattle with 3 other families, several cats, and a blind Labrador retriever named Little John. Isabel's father was a musician who had dropped out of music school. He worked odd jobs and gave the occasional guitar lesson. Isabel's mother stayed home with Agnes, cooking and gardening with the other women in the household. With 1 child, the family might have gone on like this. Isabel was born on Valentine's Day, 1979, and within a month her parents decided to go back to where they had grown up, where her father could get a good-paying job on the North Slope. Isabel doesn't actually remember, but she imagines the voyage now, 28 years later. The ferry from Seattle was crowded with other families, not Alaskan families, but the kind of loose-minded travelers who pointed and photographed, without really seeing. Like other great creatures before them, the glaciers were dying, and their death so distant and unimaginable was a spectacle not to be missed. The ferry slowed where a massive glacier met the ocean. A long, low cracking announced the rupture of ice from glacier. Then came the slow lunge of the ice into the sea. This is calving, when part of a glacier breaks free and becomes an iceberg, a kind of birth. The calving sent waves rocking the ferry. Hands gripped railings, and feet separated on gritted steel. There were shouts of appreciation and fear, but nothing like grief, not even ordinary sadness. North of Juneau, the boat lingered near some rocks. A voice announced that below, starboard, was the wreck of the Princess Sophia, sunk in a storm just before the armistice. A gale whipped the ship over some rocks and tore her open like a can of salmon. All aboard died in the oily, frigid water. Only the captain's wolfhound, which made the dark, impossible swim to shore, survived. He shivered and howled among the rocks until rescuers carried him away. Only a few yards of mast were visible above water after the ship went down, and the wind and waves had driven the bodies of passengers and crew miles along the coastline. The travelers, pondering this tragedy, lined the rails to peer into the water. Somewhere beneath them, they contemplated where the disintegrating remains of a boat, not so different from the one they were on. What did they expect to see in that water? Their own wavering reflections stared gravely back at them. Isabel's family sat in the commissary during the viewing of the Princess Sophia, eating sandwiches with no lettuce. Only a few grainy photographs remained to tell the tale. In the first, she is dressed in hand-knit blue wool, the smallest living thing, even smaller than the gulls. Her father holds her, his back against the railing, her mother and Agnes to the left. Behind them, deep dark water and stony sky. The porpoises that sometimes surfaced are not surfacing. The whales that sometimes arch smoothly over the waves are not wearing the water's fractal plaintiveness. Other photographs are notable for what is absent. Her mother, who was the photographer, only appears at the beginning of this story for the family portrait, then disappears. The steaming boat eventually harbored. There were long hours on land in a car, north then south again, down the peninsula to Soldatna, named, some said, after the Russian word for soldat, for soldier. A small city on the Kenai River known for its salmon and halibut fishing, and as a gas and bathroom break on the way to Homer. Outside town was the homestead of her father's grandmother, Agnes, her sister's namesake, who had died the previous summer. 3 rooms with a wood stove and running well water, a small garden with raspberries and a weedy patch of Sitka strawberries, an acre of woods. Her mother made the beds with felted wool and down blankets. The cast-iron pans and chipped china came with the house. Her father hung a rope swing for her sister from the tallest tree. And that is the end of the sample. So again, this is from a novel titled Glaciers, and I'm looking at the name again just because I'm really paranoid about getting the name wrong. But I want to say it's, yes, Alexis M. Smith. Look it up on Amazon, and you can download that same sample. So, thoughts on it. Again, just a few points since it's been a little time since the beginning of the stream. I'm using software that makes it so that I can't actually see any feedback. I can't see how many people are watching or if anyone's commenting, so my apologies for that. I'm reading this because I am an amateur writer myself. I wrote a lot when I was young. It's been a long time, but I'm getting back into it and learning as I go. And one of the best ways to do that is by reading widely, reading diversely. This particular one I read based on a description that I found when looking up debut novels for various authors. And we'll talk about that in a minute. First of all, I guess, what did I actually think of it? I enjoyed it significantly. Beautiful, clear, straightforward language that's still very, very evocative. And I really like the idea that, yes, we're getting this holistic image of a person and her history and her family, primarily through indirect things, through imagery, through memories and impressions. The author very clearly trusts and respects the audience. This is not something that's going to come up and hit you upside the head with an idea to try to drive home a point. It lays out the information, and it's a pleasure to go through. The language is beautiful, and you can develop a sense, a feeling of what's going on, the character that you're reading about as you go. So I think with each of these, I'll probably get around to this question as I do these readings, and that is, would I read the whole book? Because that's actually the other reason I do this is, I don't know about you, but I used to be the sort of person who, if I started to read something, I had this really irrational rule I would impose on myself that said, if you're going to start this, you have to finish it. And I've enjoyed reading much, much more since then. when I've now changed to say, like, sure, I'll read a chapter or two, but I'm not going to commit to read the whole thing until, I let it process and kind of see it in light of all the other samples I read, and I'm going to finish what I really enjoy. I think I will probably look this one up, though. I'll probably look this one up and finish it. I've enjoyed what I've read so far. I think it's interesting that, so this definitely falls in, from my perspective, in the category of it's literature, right? This is literary style, literary fiction. Because we're not seeing this really overt plot, right? We're learning about a character that's one, not the only thing that's a hallmark of that style, but it's one of the main things. I'm also enjoying it because as much as I, as a writer, am learning to say what I want to say and put forward the story I want to put forward the way I want to do it, when you're new at this, it's reasonable to lack confidence. It's actually, I think, a good thing to lack confidence in what you're doing so that you can be open to a lot of different ideas. But this, for me, is very affirming in terms of style. So back to the reason, why did I read this one in particular? Well, this came up, like I said, I was looking at lists of debut works from authors. And there was a particular description for this one, which I will look up here very briefly, that caught my eye, made me want to read more. Let's see. Glaciers unfolds internally. The action shaped by Isabel's sense of history, memory, and place. Recalling the work of writers such as, again, I don't know how to say the name, I apologize for that, but Jean, I don't know if it's Riss or Rice, probably Riss, Rees, maybe even, Marguerite Duras, and Virginia Woolf. For Isabel, the fleeting moments of one day can reveal an entire life. While she contemplates loss and the intricate fissures it creates in our lives, she accumulates the... And it goes on. My apologies, but I can't actually see the rest on the device I'm using. So this is interesting to me because it's addressing a very specific problem that I'm having in the work that I'm writing right now, where I have a character, minor temporary character, that's still important to the story, who is emotionally empty, void, who's, like a lot of people, it's in the, say, this would be the late 70s in California, and she's a single mother who's been consumed getting by, taking care of herself and her son. And she finally has this moment where there's nothing to do. There's just the last part of the day is kind of open before her, and she's realizing that she's kind of lost a big piece of herself, looking at her son, and that she's feeling how numb she's become to everything. She's also, for reasons that I won't go into here in the interest of time, she's mute and an amnesiac. She's having trouble remembering things. And this idea, there's so much advice you get as a young writer, figuratively, that is, as a new writer, where it's jump into the action right away, make sure you focus on this and that and the other thing. And it's just not, it's very easy to let that influence you, even if you conscientiously reject the idea and think that, I need to do this, I need to do that. And so that's not what this scene is. The scene is a lot of sense imagery again. It's most of what's going on transformationally in the character is internal. She's mute, so it's difficult to externalize it through dialogue or some of the other things that you might normally use. So this is enjoyable. I mean, this is very similar in tone to what I'm aiming for, and so it's really enjoyable to read. It's instructive. I appreciate it very much. So looking forward to reading more. So that's it for today. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. I hope you enjoyed it. If there's anything that you'd like to recommend that I read a sample from, by all means, drop a comment. You can go to PDXKCM on Twitter, on YouTube, on Periscope. And I'm even broadcasting to platforms that are really not set up for this kind of thing, like Mixer, which is, really, really oriented around gaming. But I've seen other readers, I've seen other people broadcasting on there, so why not try? And also Twitch TV. So any of those places, I'm PDXKCM on all of those. And Yeah, hope you enjoy it. Have a great day, and I don't know when the next time will be, but hopefully I'll talk to you again soon. Bye bye.